Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. See your faces coming in. Take a deep breath and arrive in this space. And as always, as I welcome you, I also welcome some of the more than human world. This one today might be a little easier than some of the past ones have been. Let's see if you recognize these folks from the more than human world. Welcome, cows. Taking a few more breaths as more people arrive. More cows arrive. We are grateful for their presence. And we are grateful for yours. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon and welcome to the Compassion Consortium. I'm Reverend Sarah Bowen and I'm joined today by co-founders Victoria Moran and Reverend William Melton. If you read our newsletter this month, you heard that William suffered an aphasia stroke. He is home on the road to an excellent recovery. And so even though you will not hear him today in his usual speaking role, you will see him. He's doing a good wave over there. Know that he's here with us. He's engaged. He's doing well. All that said, ongoing prayers and good wishes for thorough healing are always much appreciated. Our field education placement, Adriana DeFazio from Union Theological Seminary, is also with us again today. We've been delighted to have her with us the last few months, and we're excited she's getting close to the completion of her Master's of Divinity degree. So although we'll miss Adriana's role in our service in the same way you've seen in the last couple months, be assured we will woo her back as often as we can for check-ins as her studies and her young baby human at home allow. I urge you all to continue to follow her or start following her on Instagram at Vegan Theologian to keep up on her travels and to support her important, very, very important work in this world. As always, Phil is on the bridge navigating us through the Zoomosphere, and later we'll be adding our service replay to YouTube. Elaine's here too for our Compassion in Action segment with John Oberg. And to ensure we don't have unwanted or disruptive guests that we didn't invite, we have turned off some Zoom sharing functions. We meet for Sunday service on the fourth Sunday of every month, except for next month. So write this down, next month, third Sunday of the month, and I'll remind you at the end of the service too. If you're new to us, welcome. We are an interfaith, interspiritual, and interspecies community. So interfaith means we welcome people of any spiritual or religious tradition, philosophy, system of meaning making, everything. And we feature a diverse range of them in our programming. Today, we'll be exploring Bhakti Marga with Swami Chidananda. Interspiritual means we believe underneath all of those paths, there lies a commitment to three common values. And if you've been coming here a long time, you hopefully have those memorized. They are peace, compassionate service, and love for all of the Earth community. And by the way, happy belated Earth Day to everyone. Finally, we are interspecies, which means we consider the needs of the other than humans that we share the planet with. So many of them. So at the beginning of each service, I offer an acknowledgement to draw our awareness to beings who are indigenous to a habitat. This month, I spent 30 consecutive hours on an Amtrak train from New York's Penn Station, the land of the Lenape, all the way to New Orleans, the land of the Choctaw, the Chitmaca, and the Homa. Louisiana is a very, very interesting habitat. It's very different from my own. It's home to the otter and the muskrat, to the armadillo and the blue crab. It's also home to several very rare species that are indigenous to those state lines that we humans draw around things and call them states. The Louisiana pine snake, the Louisiana black bear, and the Louisiana pearl shell. Alone in my little train roomette, I was positively gleeful. Honestly, I was like a 5-year-old. I have never been on a long train ride. I was so excited. And I was about to meet 2,900 humans who were joining together for the Humane Society's annual Animal Care Expo. Over 4 days, myself and two of our animal chaplaincy students, Jill Angelo and Patrick Cole, we would attend presentations on animal care and animal protection. We'd get to talk to people about all these juicy ethical quandaries that we talk about here. We'd get the opportunity to share the Compassion Consortium's tenets with the humans who stopped by our booth and the roundtable conversations we would have. To say I was excited does not do any justice to my mood. I was bouncing off the train walls. And you all have seen me bounce, so you know I can bounce. And then it happened. The feeling that far too many of us are familiar with. The abrupt gasp when you see suffering, or you see violence, where you don't expect it. The moment when a deep pain cuts through joy, obliterating it. Here's what happened. Another train had passed by, just inches from the glass window on which I was looking out. And a deep knowing about that train made my heart drop to my feet and my breath shorten. And my lips started to quiver and tremble, and tears came to my eyes. Because in that passing train, through slats, I saw bodies. I saw cows, to be precise. And they were not in a cozy roomette like I was on an exciting adventure. No, they were part of a whole string of livestock cars. So I bore witness to the whole train without preparation, without knowing that that's what I was going to see out that window, looking at the beautiful, picturesque horizon. But I should have known better. For about 10 minutes, car after car after car. And I thought of the 1822 Martins Act, which was intended to make it a crime to treat cattle cruelly or to inflict unnecessary suffering upon them. And I thought of all of those laws starting in the 1830s regarding transporting live animals, when the people in the cities said, we don't want to see this anymore, ship them out. Thought of all those laws that were supposed to improve conditions, and in many ways just led to making animal transport invisible and able to scale at alarming rates. Cow cars, poultry cars, pig cars, elephants and other creatures on circus trains. Did you know they had fish cars to stock lakes for sport fishing? Large aquariums on the rails. And I soon realized, as all of this was spinning through my head, I was going offline. I was having what Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky calls a trauma exposure response. A trauma exposure response. I was sad for the cows. I was angry at whoever was transporting them, whoever had imprisoned them. And I was angry that someone had ruined my happy-go-lucky mood. And then I felt guilty about being mad about losing my joy because I was in the roomette and the cows were in the stock car. And so I started berating myself. And then I swore I would never, ever, 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 ever again ride on a train because the whole system was now complicit in my mind with harming animals. I was spiraling. My thoughts were spinning. My eyes were flowing. My heart was breaking. So I want to ask you as we start today, have any of you ever felt this way? Because I presume you have. What do you do? How do you soothe yourself? How do you get your nervous system back online? Something we can talk about in fellowship today. It's a big question for those of us involved in the work we're involved in. And I started wondering, how do people keep emotional balance in the world amidst all that suffering, especially when the invisible becomes visible and it hits you unexpectedly? And I've been thinking about it because I'm a theologian in relation to this month's holy days. I've been thinking about the Israelites escaping from slavery in Egypt and what that felt like. The shock of Jesus's people that they felt when he was nailed to a cross, when he was missing from a tomb. The shock Siddhartha must have felt when leaving the palace, he became aware of illness and death and suffering. And I've also been thinking about the ways religious communities have developed to handle suffering that their communities feel. Their traditions of Passover and Ostara, the liturgy of Easter, the fasting and prayer of Ramadan, the practicalness of the Eightfold Path. But in that moment on the train, I couldn't get to any of that knowledge. Couldn't get to any of it. What I needed was something soft. I wrapped up in a blanket. I put on my fuzzy slippers. And I grabbed this guy, my plushy fox traveling companion, who always travels with me. I soothed myself. And I reminded myself that I was headed to a conference of people who are concerned about the same issues I'm concerned about. We're trying to end suffering for Earth's creatures, human and other than human alike. I would have friends to unpack this experience with. I told myself, just hold on. Now, it may seem strange to some of you that just a wee past midlife, I like to think, person is here telling you that they snuggled with a plushy fox. Does that feel odd? Is it weird when I held up my stuffed animal? Research tells us that when people are in a negative frame of mind, especially when we're sad, that we can be more attentive to tactile stimuli. We are more likely to crave soft textures. There's a remarkable amount of research about the usefulness of teddy bears, from soothing fears about medical procedures to curbing social anxiety and healing trauma. It's no surprise Beanie Babies sell as well as they do. There's a lot of research about why we love cozy blankets and soft yoga pants and warm sweaters. Softness can help soothe us the way our caregivers might have soothed us when they swaddled us in baby blankets. Well, I made it to New Orleans, and at the Animal Care Expo, Jill Patrick and I passed out hundreds of small plushies to animal care workers. Of course, with a card on it with a link to our website. We passed them out and we talked to animal care workers and animal protection folks. We talked to them witnessing their moral injury and empathetic distress and the compassion fatigue that they feel in relation to their work and being in the world that's not always compassionate. We witnessed their pain. We supported them through it. This month in our newsletter and at our engaged member practice circle, I'm going to share more tips with you on how we can alchemize stress and suffering. And in a few minutes, Adriana will be guiding us through yet another helpful spiritual practice. We hope the tools we offer you here at Sunday service soothe your body, soothe your mind, soothe your spirit, and we hope they sustain you in your impertinent work on this planet. Adriana, the floor is yours.
Each service, a member of our community shares our tenets of agreement. Today, Amy Ryan will do so. Amy Ryan received her undergraduate degree in anthropology from the University of California, Irvine. She chose a career path working with discarded, abused, and harmed domesticated animals to live in our antiquated, abusive, and overcrowded sheltering systems. Her intentions were to help end the suffering of these animals, but eventually had to leave the field due to extreme burnout, compassion fatigue, lack of support, and little to no end in sight for shelter reform. This past November, after 30 years of nonstop volunteer community outreach and multiple positions inside a dysfunctional sheltering system, she made a decision to leave the field to preserve her sanity. She also operated the only animal ambulance in the state of Georgia. She's currently an animal chaplain in training who will be ordained at our June service. Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Adriana. Tenets of Agreement, Founding Principles. 1, we acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. We may refer to this force as God, but it is known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. 2, we recognize the common moral principles inherent within all wisdom traditions. 3, we affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith and moral philosophy and are to be extended to all sentient beings. 4, we stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, and equality, and hold these as essential in our human relations. 5, we hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as our human animals, and that there is moral parity between us. 6, we avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. 7, we endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as any activities that cause harm to our fellow beings, human or otherwise. 8, we aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. 9, we offer guidance and peer support for all those seeking a more compassionate and spiritual life. 10, we commit to sharing these principles freely, with humility and respect, in support of non-human animals and the earth.
Thank you, Amy.
Hello, today's Song of Compassion was suggested by compassionist Jack Harkins, who's here with us today. And in it, some of the world's biggest names in music have joined voices to inspire real action on climate change and to support the United Nations call for meaningful universal climate agreement in Paris this December. Here's Love Song to the Earth with Paul McCartney, Sean Paul, Natasha Bedingfield, and other artists in celebration of this year's Earth Day, which was yesterday, April 22nd.
This is an open letter from you and me together. Tomorrow's in our hands now.
Find the words that matter, say them out loud. I'll make it better somehow.
Looking down from up on the moon is a tiny blue marble. Who'd have thought the ground we stand on
Could be so fragile.
This is a love song to the earth.
You know ordinary world, a diamond in the universe.
Heaven's poetry to us. Keep it tight. Keep it tight. Keep it tight. 'Cause it's our world. It's not about possessions, money or religion. How many years it might live.
When the only real question that matters is still a matter of perspective. Looking down from up on the moon, you're a tiny blue marble.
Who'd have thought the ground we stand on
Could be so fragile. This is a love song to the earth. You're no ordinary world.
diamond in the universe. Heaven's poetry to us. Keep it safe. Keep it safe. Keep it safe. Keep it safe.
Keep my words safe.
'Cause it's our world.
But bang, 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 bang. Say mama earth is in a crazy mess. It's time for us to do our best. From deep sea straight back to Everest. She understands the stress unless you wanna be motherless. Green heart is the way I dress. Speediness and too much greediness. 6 billion people all want plentiness. Some people think this is harmless. But if we continue, then only the emptiness.
No, 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 no. This is a love song to the earth. You're no ordinary world. A diamond in the universe. Heaven's poetry to us. Keep it safe. Keep it safe. Keep it safe.
Ooh, take a breath on that one. Yeah. Got some letter writing to do tonight, I think. Next, Adriana will offer us, as promised, an interspecies spiritual practice.
So for today's practice, I wanted to offer something speaking to some of the themes that Rev Sarah so beautifully spoke to at the beginning of our service. Those unexpected moments where we encounter some type of violence that we don't really know what to do with. And so if you're familiar with the practice called RAIN, I'm going to offer us an abbreviated version. So RAIN is an acronym created by the meditation teacher Michelle McDonald, but popularized by Insight meditation teacher Tara Brach. And RAIN is a practice that can be done extended, but can also be done in those moments that we find ourselves in. When we notice that we're experiencing a strong emotion to something that's in front of us, and we don't really know what to do with it. And so how do we direct our attention to our minds and hearts, hold ourselves with some care in those moments, and be able to not necessarily move on, but move forward from that embodied place. So I'll guide us throughout, but I invite you to take a tall and comfortable seat. If you're seated in a chair, feeling both your feet firmly planted on the ground beneath your knees and your hands palms down on tops of your thighs. If you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes or to simply rest your gaze downward in front of you. Let's simply begin by taking a deep inhale through your nose and exhale, releasing through your mouth. Again, inhale and exhale, release. One more time. Inhale and exhale. To begin, I invite you to recall a moment that may have been recent for you in which you encountered some discomfort, perhaps regarding the natural world, an animal, and bringing to mind this memory, beginning to simply recognize what this feels like in your body. Do you feel tension in your chest, tightness in your belly, constriction in your throat or forehead? First step is to simply recognize your experience of this discomfort. This experience of your heart being broken a little bit in real time. From there, we simply acknowledge that these feelings, these emotions are there. You can acknowledge it simply by silently saying to yourself, I see you, heartbrokenness, or whatever that feeling may be for you. And then from here, we inquire. We show a little curiosity, investigate this emotion or feelings within our body with interest and care. You may offer yourself the questions. What is this emotion or feeling pointing me to? What does it need from me right now? And then lastly, nurturing this emotion with self-compassion. Like that soft blanket or plushie that Rev Sarah referenced. Offering yourself that same gentleness and comfort. You may silently say to yourself, I'm here with you to your emotion or experience. You may even say, I love you and I'm listening. Trusting in the goodness of your experience. And then allowing your mind, body, and heart to simply rest now. Feeling your body breathe in and out. In these moments where we bear witness to animal suffering, it can feel really easy to want to run away, to ignore, to push away any feelings of discomfort. But this is simply a practice that we can offer ourselves in those moments of recognizing our suffering that binds us with another species, while also tending to our minds and hearts with some sense of care. Let's close our practice as we began by taking a deep inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Again, inhale deep and full. And exhale, releasing. Last one. Inhale. And exhale. In your own time, begin to open your eyes or raise your gaze and bring your awareness back into your immediate space. Thank you all so much for your practice.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Absolutely calming. Hi, everybody. I do want to draw your attention to the note in the chat about an article appearing this very day in the New York Times by Peter Singer, the philosophy professor who coined the term animal rights. It's called Fix Your Diet, Save the Planet. And the coolest part about that to me is that the New York Times chose to run it on this just post Earth Day. So pretty cool stuff. And something else that's pretty cool is our guest today, and he is Swami Chidananda, whose story is absolutely heartwarming. He's going to tell it to us now. Welcome, Swami.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you, Victoria, for inviting me.
Well, I would invite you anywhere, anytime, and everybody will become a Swami Chidananda fan during this. So you can Google him and find podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. And there's also a way that you can hang out with him for a weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So start us off today just by telling us about your background and your very unusual spiritual experience.
Sure. I don't think we have so much time to go into the details, so I'll try and make it as short as possible. I grew up in the States, even though I was born in India. My mother moved to the States when I was very young, and I was not very much into the Vedic tradition. There's always a joke that the busiest time of the year in a temple is right before a finals exam. So it's this idea that we go to the temple to make a business deal with the divine. And that sort of understandings didn't really resonate with me. So I was very much an atheist or an agnostic at best. And my focus was very much on material gratification, trying to make as much money as possible. And after graduating university, I started to working in investment banking in Wall Street. And I was about to get married. I was engaged. And then through a series of events, I came across the book Autobiography of a Yogi, which is a great book that speaks about a saint named Paramahamsa Yogananda, who came to the States and started to teach something called Kriya Yoga. I read this book, and for the first time, I started to understand the deeper philosophy of the Vedic tradition. Beyond just going to the temple to make business deals, there is a deep underlying philosophical tradition that is thousands and thousands of years old. And as I started to resonate with it, it took me on a trip to India. In India, I met my spiritual guru. The moment I saw him, it's like falling in love for the first time. Like, imagine if you were walking in the desert in the night and it's very, very cold, and you come across a fire and the fire warms you and you find shelter and comfort near the fire. That's how I felt. I felt like I was walking in the desert of material reality for my whole life. And for the first time, I came across somebody that I can say was embodied love. Not human love, but unconditional love. And that feeling made me just give up everything and say, I'm just going to follow you. And for the next 10 years, I just stayed with him every day, morning and evening. I just was with him. I didn't come back to the United States. I didn't go back to work. I didn't see my family or friends. I just lived with them for 10 years. And then after 10 years, he told me, okay, go back to the States, speak about what you learn, share this love. And so then I came back, and I came to New York City, and I started to talk about the Bhagavad Gita and some yogic technique. I started to teach some yogic techniques, and through time, we were able to have a place in Elmira, New York, which is about 4 hours from New York City. We created an ashram there approximately a year ago. And there's about 6-7 monks living here, and we have events and different things. And I would say that's the Reader's Digest version.
Oh, I love it. I'll read that article over again. So where did the veganism come in? You weren't raised vegetarian.
Yeah. So, the last day, the way the my spiritual path worked was that before reading the autobiography of a yogi, I used to drink a lot of alcohol and eat a lot of meat, and also partake in other activities. The moment I started to read that book, something started to shift and change in me, and I started to see reality differently. I wouldn't say that it was a conscious thing. It wasn't, this book said something and it was amazing and now I'm going to change. It was just the vibration, the energy of reading with that book and connecting to that book. It started to make me observe life in a different way. And I started to feel more disgust, if you will, when I started to drink alcohol, when I started to eat meat. And it's not that I stopped, but I started to question it. And I remember the night before I left to India in my travels, I was at the bar with my friends. And that night I drank alcohol, I ate meat, I did some other things. I got on the plane and I never touched it again. The moment I landed in India, I never touched those three things again. And I have to say that's really grace. And for me, when I observe people, inbuilt inside each one of us, we already know deep inside that eating animals, we are causing pain. It's already conditioned. It's already in us. We know this truth. But unfortunately, due to the world, due to material energy that's put on us, we become very, very numb to the emotions and feelings of anybody other than ourselves. And so as you start to go on the spiritual journey, and as you start to experience this love, the natural byproduct of that is to become vegan. It's difficult to love and then still continue to eat meat. They're diametrically opposed to each other. So for me, nobody told me be a vegan, but just the very fact of experiencing love made me just not want to do that. And so that was sort of my transition. And I remember, another story, but that was my transition.
Oh, that's healing at the desire level. It's really beautiful. So I think for a lot of us, the traditions of India can seem very foreign. So knowing that we're all coming from different places and we all have different experiences with the religions of the world, can you just start as if you were talking to a child and explain to us the philosophy of the Vedic tradition? What sets this particular spiritual path apart from some of the others?
Sure. So,
you have 6 years to explain that.
As you know, the Vedic tradition is very, very vast with so many different philosophies, so many different denominations and lineages. To talk about it in a very high level, it's a very sort of monumental task, but essentially what it comes down to is love. So it said that you are love, I am love, everything is love. And this love has three qualities. One is that it's always existed. If you want to put a form to it or formless, it doesn't really matter. That's going to be more dependent on your lineage. But one thing is that it's always existed. The second is that once you've experienced it, there's nothing higher. So when you've experienced that divine love, there's nothing higher compared to that. And the third is that it's constantly looking to experience itself more and more and more. So this love cannot be confined. It cannot be put in a box, and it's constantly ever growing. So one of the ways that it grows is to experience the opposite of itself. So experience what is it to not be this love, a distorted version of this love, a deprivation of this love. And the way that can be experienced is that this divine aspect, which we refer to as the soul or Atma, goes into this material world and forgets itself. Okay? Why does it forget itself? Just to experience separation, longing, and then eventually unity. In the longing, there's an intensity to experience that love again. If I give a glass of water to somebody in the desert and I give a glass of water to you, who's going to have a more intense experience of that glass? of water. It's going to be the one in the desert because they've been deprived of it for 3 days. The same as with love. So this deprivation of love leads to a more intense experience of it. And the way that deprivation happens is that each one of us, where a spark of this love goes into this material creation. And what happens is we are covered by a veil called Maya, or illusion. The best way that you can think about it is imagine you have VR goggles, headsets. Yeah. So you're sitting at your home, you put on the VR goggles. What happens? The moment you put on the goggles, you lose sight of your reality. And then the next thing that happens is a new reality is projected in the goggles and you start to connect with it. The same thing happens to each one of us. We're in a state of divine love all the time. We've never left it. All that's happened is that we put on these VR goggles. We've forgotten who we are. And we've become attached to a reality which is dualistic in nature and completely going up and down. The whole goal of the spiritual path is to remove the goggles and to once again be in a state of love. So everything that we do is to lead us towards removing this veil that makes us forget that we are love. And ultimately, if you want to really just take it to the very, very essence of it, it's to make us fearless. When we are not understanding of who we are, when we associate ourselves with a limited version, we're going to act from a space of fear, anger, greed, lust, whatever you might say. The moment you start to realize who you are, which is eternal, all-pervading, unchanging, ancient, all of these transcendental, then there is no space for fear. You become fearless. You act from a space of love. And that's what the Vedic tradition helps us with, to remove the goggles of Maya and to realize once again our true nature.
Beautiful. So you have opted not to just be a person with a spiritual life. You have opted to be a monk. And that's, I think, a little alien to a lot of us in the States as well. So tell us what that means. And while you're at it, tell us about the markings on your face.
Sure. So we all have a different dharma or duty in this world. Some is to be a monk, some is to be a teacher, some is to be an accountant. And it's not that one is higher than the other. There is no hierarchy in the Vedic path. We've all given a specific task to do, and how we do it determines if we realize who we are or not. Right? So it's not because I'm a monk, I'm somehow closer to the divine, or not because I'm a monk, I'm going to get there faster. The only reason that I'm a monk and you're not is just because that's my destiny, that's my dharma. And that has to do with factors of karma and past lives and all various things that we don't have time to really go into. So that's important. For me, I understood and felt that my life was to be a monk. That's the best way I can be of service. For others, is to be an accountant or a mother or a father or a yoga teacher, whatever it might be. And in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna reiterates to the warrior, Arjuna, on the battlefield, it's not about your duty. It's about how you do your duty, how you embrace your duty. And so that's what I really teach people is, yes, I'm a monk, but don't look at it as hierarchy. There have been great saints. There was once a saint. He was an accountant and he became enlightened. Guess what he did the next day? He went back to work. He started to be an accountant and he would do his accounting from 9 to 5. Then from 6 to 8, he would help people. 8 to 10, he would go and be with his family and he'd start over the next day. So in that way, this life was something that resonated with me, but it's not the only way to realize who you are. Now, the markings on my face, this has to do with the philosophy that we follow, which is called the path of bhakti or the path of devotion. So the 2 lines here represent the feet of humanity. So it's a reminder that we should always be in service to others. Thus, the line, I'm not going to really be able to see it, but the bottom sort of leaf down here, this represents devotion. If you don't love, you can't serve. There has to be some love that awakens in you to be able to want to serve. And this is what I had mentioned also with the vegan aspect. As love started to awaken in me, the natural understanding of this love is, yeah, I shouldn't kill animals for food. So through an awakening of love, we serve. So who helps us awaken that love? So there's a red dot in the middle of this. That's the guru or the spiritual teacher. The teacher helps us to awaken this love. And as we start to awaken in this love, we start to serve. And as we start to serve, this red line represents Maya. We split the illusion of this reality and we start to see it for what it is. So through devotion, we serve, and through service, we rise beyond the veil of illusion through the grace of the spiritual teacher.
So you've used the word yoga several times, and I think a lot of people hear yoga and they think downward dog. What do you mean when you say yoga?
So yoga means union. So it's to come into union with love. So as I mentioned earlier, because of the veil of illusion that has covered us, we have forgotten our true nature. And through doing yoga, we once again rise beyond this veil and realize our eternal nature. So yoga means union. Another definition of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, which means to quiet the fluctuations of the mind. So it's said that only when the mind becomes calm, only when the mind starts to stop to run from one place to another and becomes focused, can we then have the ability to go within. So yoga is bringing us to union with who we are by helping us to quiet the fluctuations of the mind.
So at the beginning of our service, we heard beautiful cow sounds. And I know that in your tradition, all life is honored, all life is one, but there's something special about cows. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the cow in the Vedic tradition represents an animal that helps. Well, there's a lot of deeper sort of stories associated with the cow. And I have to be careful how I phrase it, because last time I spoke about it, there was some feedback on it. But essentially, the way that we look at the cow, right? Please keep in mind, this is our tradition. If you disagree, no problem. Is that the cow is by nature very giving. Okay, it's always giving. The manure that it produces helps us to farm. A lot of the various elements of it helps us to live in a particular way. It is also said that in our tradition that the cow is protected by the divine and it represents the mother. So the mother is somebody that is constantly giving, but she never asks for anything in return. And the cow is the same way. She gives so much of herself, but never asks for anything. So in that way, she is always seen as a reminder of the grace of Mother Earth, the beauty of Mother Earth. And so when we look at the cow, it's not that we worship the cow as God, right? We don't worship a cow as the same way we would worship an aspect of God, like, for example, Krishna. But when we see the cow, we venerate the cow because the cow, when we see it, reminds us of the beauty of Mother Earth. That's why we put our hands to her. That's why we venerate to her. That's why we bow down to her, because of that reminder of what she represents, the one that is constantly giving without asking for anything in return.
And something very special that some of us will be able to experience the first few days of June is to hang out with some cows at Farm Sanctuary as part of a wonderful in-person weekend retreat, June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at the Bhakti Marga Ashram, started by Swami Chidananda and his colleagues. And he'll be there. I'll be there. Dr. T. Colin Campbell, the wonderful nutritional biochemist known for the China study, will be one of our presenters. And it's called The Soul of Ahimsa. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think we really wanted to in the Vedic tradition, a lot of times milk is used for many things. And what makes us very unique is we're one of the first sort of Vedic vegan ashrams, I would say, in the world. And for us, the protection of the animals is very, very important. And it is very much having to do with the philosophy of ahimsa, which means doing the least harm possible. And so we thought that why not combine both of them together to speak about veganism and to also speak about some yogic philosophy, to go deeper into some of the concepts that I had spoken about here. And we thought that a 3-day weekend retreat would be a wonderful way to go into the philosophy, also have some great speakers, including Victoria, speak about veganism, and to come together as a community and to also get to know each other and to connect. So yeah, I think that was one of the main reasons why we wanted to do it, and very much looking forward to it.
Oh, I think it's going to be magical. And I love in this time when all we hear is, oh, people can't get along and people who are different can't talk to one another. And what we're going to be doing is bringing this lovely idea of ahimsa, spirituality, together with Dr. Campbell. He's all about healthy living. Some people say, oh, I'm not one of those health people. I'm a spiritual vegan. I'm an ethical vegan. You know what? We can all come together and celebrate. And then adding on that field trip to Farm Sanctuary is going to be the most fun ever. So there's information in the chat about that. Elmira is close to Ithaca, New York, close to Cornell University. So if you're in the Northeast or if you want to take a trip, then we would love to see you early in June. So we've got about 40 seconds left, Swami. Can you just give us some kind of little thought or blessing to end with?
40 seconds, sure.
Or 50.
Yeah. I think the most important thing, it really goes back to love and to allow yourself to let something greater than yourself help to support you on your journey. Because a lot of times when we walk this journey, we tend to think we're alone, but in reality, we're not alone. There's that divinity that is always with us. So take the time to feel it in your breath, feel it in your inhalation and exhalation, and know that there's something greater than yourself that has your best interests at hand and is always there to support you whenever you connect to it.
Thank you so much.
And Swami Chidananda, thank you so much for that inspiring and uplifting conversation. Today, in Compassion in Action, we have somebody that I think is absolutely amazing. His name is John Oberg, and he is an animal advocate, an influencer, a social media professional, and guru, I would say, through his strategic use of these platforms, all social media platforms, and I think a brilliant use as well. His animal advocacy has been seen over 1 billion times. Sometimes I don't think we realize what 1 billion is, but that's 1,000 million. That's a lot. Anyway, John, we are so delighted to have you with us today. Thank you for being here.
Elaine, thanks for having me. Victoria, thank you for inviting me. And it's a real honor to be here with such magical people, everybody on this call. And, it's a really honor to follow Swami. That was really beautiful to hear his loving story and origin story. So it's great to be here with all of you.
John, can you tell us a bit about your history, how and why you started caring about animal issues?
Yeah, the reason I started caring about animal issues was really my mom. My mom was the person who instilled a love and compassion and respect for animals in me. It was many years before I took that love and compassion and I applied it to my food choices, however. But I grew up an animal lover. My mom and I, we would TNR cats, and we would rehome animals. We would protest deer hunts. We would do many different things. And so my mom really taught me that animals are vulnerable and we impact animals all the time with our choices. And we therefore should really try and do everything we can to make the world a better, kinder place. And so I began my love for animals when I was young, started doing activism with my mom. But it wasn't until I was about 20 years old that I actually made the choice to go vegan. And that was when things kind of came full circle.
Is that when you started really active animal advocacy as well?
Yeah. So when I was, it's a long story, and so I will keep it very short. But in essence, I was in Finland in 2008, and I was traveling around, and I met this guy, and we became friends, and we were talking about different things, and he was talking about activism, and I decided to tell him that I want to be an activist. He asked me what kind of activist I want to be, and I said I want to be an animal activist. And he said, if you want to be an animal activist, the first thing you got to do is stop eating animals. And I had never made that connection between loving and having respect and compassion for animals, and then implementing that into my, what I did 3 times a day, which is what I choose to eat. And so that was kind of the last straw in terms of the different ways in which I was influenced to stop eating animals. And so I went vegan shortly after that. And I watched a film called Earthlings. If raise your hand if you've watched Earthlings, anybody here? Yeah, very powerful film. And so it was, really, really eye-opening. Up until that point, I thought that animals lived decent lives with one bad day, and I realized, wow, these farm animals are living lives of misery from birth to death, essentially. And not only that, it wasn't just animals who were raised for meat, it was animals raised for eggs, for milk, and so on. And so I decided to become vegan and become an activist. So I started getting involved with activism in 2009, when I was living in Arizona at the time.
So that activism, you're here today, I think, because we're all applauding your success in social media, something that so many of us struggle with. How and when did you start that, and how quick did that grow?
Yeah, good question, Elaine. So what I did was I started in 2009. I started volunteering, doing all kinds of different sorts of animal rights things. We would do food giveaways. We would do big demonstrations. We would be showing people videos. I'd be handing out leaflets, so many different things. And what I quickly realized was what spoke to me the most was leafletting. I actually really enjoyed handing out leaflets, and these leaflets talked about how animals are being treated on factory farms and promoting vegan eating and inspiring compassion in people. And after volunteering for that a few years, I graduated college. And then so I had the opportunity to be hired by a group called Vegan Outreach, and they actually hired me to travel around North America to hand out leaflets. So I handed out hundreds of thousands of leaflets at colleges all across North America, and I loved it. Most activists don't like leafletting. For some weird reason, I actually really enjoyed it, and it felt really powerful to get these leaflets into people's hands, and then to make it inspire people to take animal issues more seriously. And what that led to was a lot of travel. But then my mom got sick. So my mom she was diagnosed with stage 4 small cell lung cancer, and this was in 2013. And so I was devastated. She was my best friend, and I didn't know what to do, but I decided to quit my job to take care of her. And so I took essentially a long-term hiatus from Vegan Outreach, even though it was my dream job and I loved it. I knew I had to be there for my mom. And so I decided to take care of her, and they had given her 6 to 9 months to live. But she far outlasted those expectations, which was great. And in that time, while I was taking care of her, obviously I couldn't travel, but the opportunity arose to take over the social media for Vegan Outreach. And I reluctantly said yes. I didn't want to do it, but my boss at the time, John Camp, he said, I think you'd be really good at it. And it's something you can do without having to travel. And I decided, all right, I'll give it a shot. And so I started running these social media pages for vegan outreach along at my mom's bedside. Basically, I would be sitting there in a comfortable chair with my legs up on her bed, and she'd be sitting there in bed, and we'd be watching television together. I might have my laptop out and I'd be posting to Facebook or something to the vegan outreach page. And what I quickly realized, Elaine, is that in one day of successful outreach on Facebook and other social media platforms, I could reach more people than I could in, honestly, a lifetime of handing out leaflets. And I realized this is an incredibly powerful tool for the animals. And I have always gone where I think is most effective. And while I've, of course, loved handing out leaflets, like I said earlier, I realized that social media was where it was. That was where I could really make a big difference for animals. So I started doing social media professionally. So I ran the social media for Vegan Outreach for 2 years, left VO, joined a group called the Humane League, ran and oversaw their social media for 3 years. And then about 4.5 years ago, I left the Humane League to launch my own independent advocacy. And that's what I've been doing now. I focus mainly on my own social media accounts to basically get as many views as possible of really, really hard hitting content. And so I post a pretty wide variety of content, but much of it could be boiled down to happy or sad content. And that happy content is often animals in sanctuaries, which, Victoria and others are going to be so lucky to see soon at Farm Sanctuary. And then some of that is really hard hitting footage from undercover investigators who've done the hard work of going undercover and getting footage of the ways in which animals are being abused. And so that is where I focus my energy these days, is on social media.
So that brings us to our last question. And I'm glad to hear that you use a mix of happy and sad, because I think it's a big question for all of us. How to be most effective when we post in our own social media. Do you have any tips for that?
Absolutely. So I have a few tips. So for one, this might seem counterintuitive, but don't overdo it. If you are posting about animal issues all day and night, people are going to tune you out. It might work for a day or two, but your friends and family and even some strangers, they don't want to see you posting nonstop about it, because then you come across as far different than them. And also you're just flooding their stream, their social media accounts with oftentimes things they don't want to see. So I think it's important to kind of pick and choose, have outside interests as well. Talk about, your experience with theology, your experience with, spirituality. Talk about your experience with things that have nothing to do with veganism or animal rights or anything, your hobbies that you do on the weekends, your day job. Talk about other things as well. And then sprinkle in the animal content. And then when you are sprinkling in the animal content, what I really recommend doing is providing a balance of different kinds of content, a variety. So it's not just happy stuff all the time, not just sad stuff all the time. It's a variety. So you're always keeping your audience guessing as to what's coming next. So I think it's really important to try and take those things into account. And then, I think it's really important to put yourself in your audience's shoes and to meet people where they are rather than where we want them to be. So while I want everybody to be vegan and I want everybody to go vegan immediately, I understand that most people are on their own journey. Everybody's on their own journey, really. And so we have to really do what we can to chip away at the walls that people have up that prevent them from going vegan, rather than just, posting something on Facebook and expecting everybody to go vegan as soon as you hit that post button. That's not how it works. And if you have that sort of expectation, you're going to be really disappointed. So sort of lower your expectations, make them more reasonable, and then do what you can to really get as much impact as possible. And the last thing I'll say is just pay attention to what's working on social media for you and what isn't. You might find that people love when you post about vegan food, but they don't about something else. Pay attention to that and let that serve as a learning tool for you to understand how you can best utilize these social media platforms to make the biggest difference for animals that you can.
Well, John, thank you for that great advice. And also, I think one thing you've presented to us with your story of your mom, that if we do what's in front of us, we can accomplish a lot. So thank you so much. And I'm sure most of us will be following you after this. And we wish you much, much success in your good work with animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, folks, I'm feeling like I'm channeling Erica for a moment. Take a stretch. Been a lot of listening and a lot of great stuff. Thank you, John. I was almost going to call you the Taoist social media expert. A little happy, a little a little of this, a little of that. Get a little Taoism in there. Well, at least that's how a theologian sees it. Appreciate everything we've heard tonight, all of that wisdom, right? So let's take it back into practice for a minute. Let's take a couple deep breaths. We have a closing kind of piece to our service on our Sunday services called Blessings and Prayers. That is from whatever tradition you are in, whatever word. If prayers is not a word that works for you, or blessings, it's good vibes, or it's thoughts, or it's witnessing, whatever makes it useful for you. What I'm going to invite us into is about a 3.5-minute practice. It's a video that I and a familiar furry face that you might notice on this video that was taken aboard the train. And I'm going to invite us into it through silent witnessing with some instructions on the screen. And then just watching the train ride, watching the train pass by for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes in the video, and just noticing what comes up in your body and seeing if you can apply the beautiful practice that Adriana offered us today, to notice what's going on, to acknowledge it, to have some curious inquiry around it. Okay. So I'm going to ask Phil to open the chat, because we're going to need that for our practice. And I'm going to ask Phil to go ahead and play the video, and I'll see you all to unpack it a little bit after the video's over. Taking a deep breath. Noticing how you're feeling in your body. Wondering if perhaps if you live near train crossings, this might be a practice that you'd like to adopt. If you're stuck at one, turning off your radio. Just breathing and acknowledging some of what happens around us and we don't always see. Right before we read our closing prayer, I'd like to read you another helpful inspiration quote that Adriana shared with me this month. It's from a Buddhist teacher, Kate Johnson, in her book, Radical Friendship. When we feel like our world is too much for us to handle, we can plug into a force that is powerful enough to meet the challenges before us. All we need is a method for tapping in. It may be a visualization, a song, a prayer, a chant, or some combination of the above, and I'll add a video of a train. It may mean actually going there, to wade in the water, to lay on the earth, to lean against the mountain, or to gaze at the clouds passing through the sky. When we put our bodies in a position to feel held, to feel supported, to feel illuminated by something bigger than us, we can sense learn from these qualities. We can absorb and embody them. Friends, I hope that this community helps you feel held and supported by something bigger than yourself. Whether it's a force, or I might say the force, whether it's this group, whether it's a manifestation of the divine, of which Swami Chidananda spoke so beautifully to today, whether it's your social media friends, John spoke to, the way of the community, whether it's your family, your friends, whoever it is, if it's divine or human, or if it's animal, I hope you feel held and supported by something bigger than yourself. You are not in this alone. And now, Phil, if you could bring up our final prayer slide, let's extend that support outward to all beings, all the beings in the chat, all the beings on our minds, all of those who have no one to call them by name or to envision their image or their memory. When we say these words, we say it together every morning. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our life contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all. May it be so. Amen. So might it be. Any of the closing words you like to use. And as I go into the closing announcements, I'm going to courageously ask Phil to allow folks to show video if you would like to, and hope that we do that with reverence and we do that with respect for this community and for those of us who are in it. I know we've had some people here today who may be in our community right now, but not feeling that way. So we invite you into reverence for the earth. We invite you into reverence for the world, for the animals you may live with, the humans you may live with. We invite you into respect and reverence. It's nice to see your faces, folks. It's nice to see you. We have a couple of announcements for you all. First of all, thank you for joining us today. I am now going to channel William and do our closing announcements. I hope I do him justice. He does such a beautiful job of this every month. We'll see how I do. All right. First off, congratulations to the aforementioned William, who's been chosen as the featured visionary by the PAW Project, PAUW, which stands for the Post-Animal Use World. And I'm going to pop the link into the chat for you all. Please read it. It articulates so beautifully what William is all about. And if you want to know William a little more, Check that out and reach out to William. He's at compassionconsortium@gmail.org. As promised, for this month's Engaged Member Practice Circle, next slide, Phil, will include self-care practices for trauma stewardship. I'm going to introduce you to more soft, and we're going to add steep, sip, snack, sacred, and still. These are the practices that Jill and Patrick and I offered all the folks at the Humane Society conference. I'm going to offer them to you. Some really easy, great tips for self-care. If you'd like to become an engaged member or a belonging member, just sign up at the link that I just put in the chat. All right, moving on. Did someone say there was a retreat? God, someone said there was a retreat. There is a retreat. We are co-sponsor of the beautiful experiential in-person spiritual event that Victoria and Swami Chidananda already told you about. Here is the link for that again, in case you did not get it the first time, June 2nd through the 4th. Finally, please join us for Sunday's service next month. Remember, does anyone remember when it is next month? It's not the 4th Sunday, the 3rd Sunday. Okay, 3rd Sunday. Due to Memorial Day, because we think some of you are going to be out in nature Memorial Day. I know I'm going to be. So get out there with folks, get out into the natural world. But join us on the 3rd Sunday, May 31st. Our special guest is going to be Martin Rowe, the executive director of the Culture and Animals Foundation, as well as a co-founder of Lantern Books. How many people have like a gazillion books from Lantern Publishing on their shelves? I know I do. He's also Lantern Publishing and Media. He holds a master's degree in religious studies from New York University. So he is an excellent theologian as well. Our Compassion in Action guest will be Fred Beasley, the second, a forward-thinking, dynamic speaker, health, wellness educator, filmmaker, author, creative music director, global youth culture architect. Global youth culture architect. You curious about that? Yeah. So come and do that. Sign up for the registration on our website. If you enjoyed this service and want to support future Compassion Consortium programming, we love your donations. They keep the doors open. They keep the Zoom fees paid. We love them. So I will put the link into the chat for that, and consider becoming a member if you'd like to get more engaged with us. Thank you, folks, for putting May 21st in the chat. Thank you for joining us for Sunday service.